Okay, guys, we're going to look at chapter 23 today. Chapter 23, lighting and signaling circuits. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is a little bit different. I did want to make a video and talk about this a little bit, but I don't have a task sheet for us today or something to do on the car, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because there's as we'll talk about a little more in a minute, there's so many different possibilities when it comes to lighting systems and what you might possibly run into. I just didn't see a need to show you how to take a headlight bulb out or a tail light bulb out or something like that. All the cars are a little bit different there. So what I'm going to do is really try to just provide a little bit of a supplement, okay? A little bit of supplement to what's in the book, okay? Chapter 23 goes into some detail about lighting systems, about light bulbs, about different switches and brake lights and all that kind of stuff, and testing. And so that's pretty good. There's some pretty good information there, and I'm going to touch on some of that. But really what I want to talk to you about on this topic, though, like I say again, a little bit as a supplement to chapter 23. Looking at my time here, okay, here we go. So really what it boils down to here at this point in our study is that lighting systems and really everything else in the book, airbag systems, anything else that we talk about, door locks and windows and accessories and all that kind of stuff, it really boils down now to having a good diagnostic process, okay? It really does. And so lighting systems demonstrate the need to follow a diagnostic process. And that's where everybody wants to turn off their ears, right? Because nobody wants to do diagnostics. They don't want to, oh, it just needs a bulb, let's put a bulb in it. It just needs a fuse or whatever, right? Well, a lot of times it does just need a bulb in this situation when you're talking about lighting systems. But as we've already kind of gotten into a little bit, we know that that fuses can be in several different places on the car. And sometimes fuses are not always labeled like you might think they should be. Okay? Case in point is the Chevrolet G-Van. Chevrolet Savannah Express van, a GMC van. I call it G-Van because that's the body designation on it. But on those vehicles, they have a VCM that controls the lighting on it. And then there are about, I don't know for sure, at least 6 different fuses, right, that feed this body control module that directly have to do with the lighting on the vehicle, exterior lighting in particular, okay? And it may be labeled BCM3 fuse, and then it may operate the left rear brake lights, okay? So it's not labeled brake light, okay? All right? It's not labeled turn signal. It's not labeled park lights. On the old cars, it would say park lights, courtesy light, things like that, or headlights. No, they don't do that anymore, hardly, okay? So because most all of it runs through a module, and so some of it's not directly matched up in that sense. So the diagnostic process is going to help us. It's really going to allow us to be able to find the problem on these cars. And as the systems get more and more complex, as we talked about before, this gets more and more necessary to have a good process and understanding of how to diagnose these vehicles. And there's a couple other reasons here. It's because, too, nowadays, there are so many different designs when it comes to electrical systems, lighting systems included, okay? Even within General Motors, okay? They have, they're not all exactly the same. They don't name everything exactly the same. Now, most everything runs through the body control module on General Motors cars, but not everything when it comes to lighting systems, okay? So there may be more than one module. So there's multiple possible designs, okay? Particularly if you're going to work on other makes and models, okay? So ever since, let me just give you a little history here. Ever since they went from just an engine control module, right, where they just controlling the fuel injection, and they started getting into body systems, the design of these systems have just gone crazy, you might say. There's just more and more and more variations, okay, of the control systems. So as soon as they started putting some type of body control on it, these guys really just, in my opinion, they just kind of went nuts with it, okay? And they just got so many of them on there now that it just makes things that much more complex. So we really need to have a process. And if you're working on a Ford and then a Chevy and then a Toyota or something, you really have to know and have access to service information. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But multiple different designs. Some of that has to do with federal regulations when it comes to lighting systems. And sometimes we miss this point. But for a long time, the design of the vehicle, and particularly in the front and the rear of the car, were limited, okay? Because the federal government said the lights on the car have to be a certain height off the ground, they have to shine a certain direction, they only can be so bright, etc., 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 just like the government does with things, right? So they had limitations on how you could design the front of the car and all that kind of stuff. So at some point they changed that and let the regulations, they changed the regulations on that. And now we have much more different types of front ends on the car and different types of lightings. We went from incandescent bulbs to HID bulbs, and now we have LEDs, okay? So all of that's changed, and you've seen that on the front of cars nowadays. We've got all these cars with all this LED lighting and stuff, it all looks real cool, and it is, until you have to pay for one of those. Because those capsules now, excuse me, those headlight capsules now are almost non-repairable, okay? Sometimes you can replace a part on them, a lot of times you cannot. You just have to replace the whole thing, okay? And all those LEDs are expensive. Okay, so federal regulations, vehicle design, some of them are easier to get to than others. Some cars they still make some cars that, you know, it's fairly easy to get the headlight bulb. Some of them aren't. A lot of them nowadays you have to take the whole front fascia for front bumper assembly off the vehicle to get the headlights, okay? When they first started doing that several years ago, we had a lot of upset customers. You can imagine we told them, you know, it was going to be $130 to put a headlight bulb in. They're like, $130, I'll just do it myself. Well, okay, then they, you know, some of them did. A lot of them brought it back and said, how do you get this apart, right? Because the whole front fascia has to come off the car to get to these headlights on a lot of cars nowadays. Some of them on the back are like that too, okay? Tail lights and stuff. So, just how it is. And that's why we're here. Okay, as I said before, the need for a diagnostic process is, again, because not only is a lot of times, well, there's always going to be one module involved, but sometimes 2 or 3 modules just in the lighting system alone, okay? So it gets a little bit more complex. So one of the things that's important to know in our diagnostic process there is the RPO code, okay? We mentioned this before, the regular production option code. For some reason, when it comes to lighting systems, you can take a Camaro, for instance. I've worked on a lot of these later model Camaros, and they come in with some type of light that's not working, and it may take 15 minutes just to figure out which system is on the car, okay, and which light is which one, and which one, you know, is the daytime running lights, which one is actually the headlight. I mean, seriously, okay? They might have 3 or 4 different options for lighting systems, and they're all different. Yeah, they all got headlights, they all got turn signals, most all of them have daytime running lights, but they're in different places and they operate different ways, and some of them are LED, some of them aren't, and some of them are HID, and you just got multiple choices there. So you have to get that option. You have to know which system you're working on before you can even get the right schematic, because those schematics are all different depending on which option you have. So I'm just stressing the need here to have a process, right? So what I'm talking about right here at this point, that lighting systems, for sure demonstrate the need to have a good process. All right, so that process starts with figuring out what the customer's complaint actually is. You know, what is it doing, what's it not doing. Typically on a lighting system, they're not too intermittent, and typically, you know, the right front headlight doesn't work, or something like that, or the left rear tail light doesn't work. Those things are fairly easy to visually inspect and see what's going on there, okay? All right, but you want to start with a good visual inspection. You want to find out which lighting system the car has. You want to find out if anybody else has been working on it, if they've been replacing these bulbs, or, you know, something like that. I've had several of them where, you know, they come in and say, well, I keep replacing these headlight bulbs and they don't last very long. Well, typically when you have a situation like that, you've got a bad connector on there. A lot of people will just stick a new bulb in and they'll never look at the connector, okay? So if they've been putting a lot of headlight bulbs in and they still go out, you better take a look. I always take a look at the connectors anyway when I take them apart, but that's just from experience, okay? Just from experience. So, a little tidbit there. All right. So, the process, using service information then, all right? Once we know what we're after, we need to look at the description of operation of that particular system, see how it's controlled, see where all the fuses are, get our schematics so we know which fuses feed what. Sometimes it'll say left front park light fuse, right front park light fuse. Sometimes they're labeled like that, and that's good. But there again, you still may not know which fuse box they're in. Again, even on the cars, we've got multiple fuse boxes on the cars. So a schematic will tell you all that. That's what we talked about in the first 8 weeks of this class, or 7 or 6 weeks that we met, you know, about schematics. It's our roadmap to finding out what's on this car, and if we take a few minutes to look at that schematic, then we know exactly where to go and what to check if something doesn't work, right? Because we have to have 2 things at least for a light bulb to work, or for any electrical component to work, right? Power and ground. We need to see where those things are coming from, all right? All right, schematics. Description of operation, schematics, visual inspection, we've done all that. Test equipment, right? Scan tool. A scan tool is very helpful in even lighting systems. Many lighting systems will set trouble codes, so that's a good place to start. Also, you don't want to overlook looking at a scan tool. Now, typically, it's going to take a pretty high-end scan tool to look at body systems, to look at lighting, but you certainly want to take advantage of that. Sometimes they set codes. Sometimes, though, it'll tell you right on the dash that the left rear turn signal bulb's out. That's because the module is monitoring that. It's controlling it and monitoring it, okay? So, all right. Scan tool, codes. Our digital meter, right? Our digital multimeter, that's our eyes. That's our window into the electrical system of testing things and seeing what's going on. Following the schematics, following any diagnostic charts that are related to it, so that we can test those circuits, see what's going on. Checking for power, checking for ground, checking for maybe even pulse width modulation, which we really haven't talked about too much, but whatever it tells us that we need to look for, we can use our meter for, okay? Just normal test lights sometimes, and then in my cart that I'm using for a stand right here, when I roll it over to the car checking something, I've got extra fuses here, I've got extra bulbs in here, and right in the drawer right here. I got fuses and bulbs right in a little drawer right here, right along right next to my test light here, this kind of test light that we looked at before, you know, things like jumper wires, all that kind of stuff. I've got all that right here in my little cart. I take it over to the car to do some testing and take something apart and check it, okay? So, diagnostic process, very important. Sometimes it's just a fuse, sure, but sometimes it's not. All right, moving on. So, just a little bit there about that process, the importance of it, okay? So, we talk about lighting systems, though. Let me just say that there's, at least 2 major divisions when we we talk about lighting systems. And your book talks about that, chapter 23. He talks about that. I don't think he starts out talking about the introduction and the exterior lighting, and then about bulbs. But the two major divisions would be exterior lighting, okay, and interior lighting, all right? Again, those are all pretty much going to be controlled by your body control module or some type of lighting control module plus, okay? All right, exterior lighting includes headlights, daytime running lights, adaptive lighting, where there's some type of directional control of the lights, which they do a lot on some of the higher end vehicles nowadays. They have directional lighting. They also have automatic dimming, far as brights and dim. They do automatic bright lights and dimming on some cars. And then of course stop, turn, and park lights, our normal operating lights or exterior lighting. Okay, so all that, when you go to service information and lighting systems, it's usually going to break it down, ask you if you want exterior or interior first, and then subsections, okay? So you go to exterior lighting, you'll get headlights, daytime running lights, adaptive stuff, park, turn, so forth. And that might be broken up even in more subsections. It may just say left side and then right side. You may have obviously wiring for trailers, things like that. That's always fun, you know, when they bring their truck in and no trailer, right? And they say when they plug in the trailer lighting, the harness on the trailer blows a fuse. Yeah. You know what's wrong with that? It's the trailer. Okay, let's just be honest about it. 99.99% of the time, it's the trailer wiring, right? Oh, no. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a trailer wiring. Okay, put a fuse in it, put your tester in there, and sure enough, it works fine. So, anyway, trailer wiring, all those kinds of things are exterior like that. But it may be divided up in different ways as far as your schematics are concerned. So you just need to find the one you need. Okay. Then the second category is interior lighting, of course, and then interior lighting is broken up into a couple different categories also. All right, because you have dash lighting and a section of the lighting that gets dim and bright when you turn the knob, right? Okay. And then you have courtesy lights that come on when you open the door. So those are two separate sections of the interior lighting, again controlled by our box, okay? But they do divide that up. Now, sometimes that gets a little crazy trying to find a short in that system. And why do you think that might be? While I clear my throat here. Well, interior lighting, man, that stuff, the wiring for that runs all over the inside of the car. All right, because you got vanity mirrors, right? Okay, in the sun visors, right? And you got dome lights, and you got lights in the doors, and you got lights all four doors, and underneath the dash, and in the console, right? Everywhere. So there's wires running all inside that vehicle, in and out all the doors, and in the trunk, right? That are interior lights. If there's a short in the wiring, in particular, an intermittent short in that circuit, it can be really tricky to trace down. There again, you got to have a good process. You got to make sure you got the right diagram. You got ways that you can isolate certain sections of that and try to find that short. So just be aware of that type of deal. Okay. So lighting and signaling circuits. All right, just a little bit of a tidbit here of how this works. Your book, like I say, goes into some more detail. Some of it might even be a little confusing because they show these turn signal switches and stuff. Oh, particularly like on page 332 in your book. It shows a turn hazard switch. So that's pretty much an old style, what I call analog switch. Okay, and it shows all those switches in there, but that's because there's multiple switches in one switch. And when you move that switch, it moves multiple contacts, okay? So those are a little tricky, but in a sense, particularly looking at it on page like that. But it basically just switches it to the left side, the right side. Then on a hazard, it connects all of them together, and then it runs through some type of flasher, okay? But again, the flashers are inside the modules nowadays. I'm going to keep coming back to that because that's the way they're made. We don't have flashers anymore. It's inside here. The flasher noise, by the way, okay, that little clicking noise, doesn't come out of here, it comes out of the radio now. On all the General Motors cars, there's no separate flasher that makes a noise, okay? That bimetallic contact band in there, clicking, popping, clicking, and popping. Yeah, that was a physical noise you hear. Now, it's an automated noise that comes out of the radio. The the radio generates that noise, or that tone, if you will, comes out the left front door speaker or dash speaker on GM cars. So, yeah, you sure can't disconnect that one. Let's take the radio out, okay? So, anyway, that comes out of the radio now. So all this stuff, again, is controlled by the module, but this is what's controlling the lights on the thing, okay? So those switches are a lot different now. Switches are just simply an input. The headlight switch, turn signal switch, your hazard switch, all those now are simply just an input to the module and says, hey, turn on the hazard flashers, okay? And then it turns on all 4 lights and makes them all blink at the same time, right? Because it controls each bulb separately. And so you can turn them all on at the same time, or just the right front, left front, etc. Okay? So, brake switch still plays a part in that though. The brake switch though, most of the time is still just an input to the module. Not always, but most of the time it's still just an input to the module. Also has an input to the ECM for cruise control. But when they went to this module controlling everything, all the switches went from actually switching power to just being an input, okay? It's just a low reference input or something like that, where the module sees that input from the driver that they want a certain light to operate, and then it turns them on, okay? So that's just something to note there. One of the other things he talks about here in diagnosing things is bad grounds. So that's one thing in particular on lighting circuits. Electricity is always looking for a path to ground, okay? And so if a wrong bulb is installed, or if you have an open element in a double element bulb, but still one element's still good and you got a bad ground, you know, sometimes it back feeds through the other side and you get dim lights and you get some that blink and some that don't blink. You get all kinds of really strange things. So when the tail lights are just being like, boy, that doesn't make any sense. You know, what's it doing? And all the bulbs are good. You want to check for grounds. Now that ground can be bad at the socket itself where the bulb is. Seen that happen a lot of times where the little terminal inside breaks off. Or it can be back under the frame somewhere wherever that ground is at. And sometimes there's a ground on one side and the other side both. Again, the possibilities or the choices there are a multitude because of the way they design the cars, okay? It could be anywhere. That's why you have to have a schematic. Okay, you got to have a road map. Or you just spend all day looking for it. Or you just throw up your hands and say, I don't know how to do it. But that's not why we're here, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We want to be professional here. We want to find out what's going on. Again, it's a good feeling when you find that problem and you fix it and everything works right, okay? I mean, that's just part of the reward of doing this business, okay? All right, what else there? Again, some cautions about halogen bulbs and so forth. I think by now everybody should know you don't touch the bulb itself with your oily fingers, okay? Those bulbs get really, really hot and you put some oil on that bulb and it's just like putting grease in a frying pan. It's gonna ruin the bulb, okay? So I think everybody probably knows that by now. We don't touch the bulbs. We're very careful about putting them in. Some of the high intensity discharge systems, those are a little bit more difficult to test because you can't test it at the bulb because it's very, very high voltage, okay? So typically there's two parts to those high intensity discharge things. You have the bulb and a ballast, and obviously a fuse. All right. So it's either the bulb or the ballast in those cases. That's just how it is. It's one of the two that's causing the problem. And typically it's the bulb. You can pull those bulbs out and look at them and tell sometimes if they're damaged on the inside or burned out. So basically, I'll be honest with you, on a high intensity discharge HID system, you pretty much have to just put a new bulb in there and see if it works. Okay, if it doesn't work, then you put a ballast in there and see if it works. Okay, so you just have to communicate that to your customer, to your service advisor, to your parts department, what's going on there. I know I worked with some guys that had a lot of extra bulbs, okay, HID bulbs, just for that purpose, so they could test that out in the shop, find out what it needed before they sold the job. It's just that way. You can check, see if you got power and ground coming to the assembly, but after that, there's no test there. There really isn't, other than putting another part in there. So there's things like that you run into. Also, but your service information will tell you that too, many times. Okay. Page 340 gets into LED lights. Again, the more LED systems we have, things like that, it's a capsule now, okay? And now you just have, instead of multiple wires going to that capsule, you just have 3 wires nowadays, okay? Pretty interesting, because they just have power and ground, and then our third wire will be a data line, yeah? A data line coming to that headlight assembly. Because inside that assembly is another little module in there. And it's talking to this module. And this module is telling it to turn on the daytime running lights. This module is telling it to turn that daytime running light off and turn on the turn signal. You've seen cars do that, right? You got those little LED lights on the bottom that are daytime running lights, and then when they turn the turn signal on, that goes off and it flashes the turn signal. Well, that's not another wire. That's just information. That's just data that's coming from the box on the inside to that module, headlight module, okay? That's how they do it. So they cut down on the number of wires and up the price of that headlight, okay? So all that fancy lighting in the front and in the back now, a lot of it just has 3 wires going to it, and it's power and ground and data, okay? So that's something that's a little different. Excuse me. Okay. It talks a little bit about headlight aiming, and there's a good picture there on page 341. That's a pretty standard thing there, about 25 feet from the wall. And you just measure up to the middle of that light bulb, the headlight assembly. There's going to be an indicator there, a little hole or something that you measure to. Okay, and then you just measure to the wall, the same height, and you adjust that. Most of them nowadays just have an up and down adjustment. They don't have a left and right adjustments anymore. They used to a long time ago, but they don't really do that too much anymore. Okay, it's just really kind of an up and down, and you got to shine it on a wall there where you can make those measurements. But I think every time I've looked that up in service information, it always says pretty much the same thing as this says, 25 feet from a wall, and make your adjustments there. Okay, not too big of a deal there. All right. He goes into some other things there, illuminated entry, dimmer switches, automatic mirrors and things like that. So you can look at that and take note of that. Then he shows some aiming and stuff like that. So I just wanted to touch base a little bit in the book there, and then add, like I say, a little bit of a supplement to that about the need to follow a process and to do your diagnosis, find out what's on the car, you know, and what the RPO code is and things like that, and how important it is to have a good process and the right information when you're diagnosing these kind of problems. So I hope that was a little helpful. Again, this week, no task sheet on this week. Just wanted you to watch this video and to, of course,